Welcome to episode 77 of Rubbish Talk with me, Alasdair.
And me, Jane Bond.
And today, myself and Jane are going to chat about household waste collection methods and look a bit at the history of that and how it's evolved over the years. But before we do that, what news have you got, Jane?
Well, I've got a news, and that's quite interesting. It's about a wet wipe island clogging up an iconic stretch of London's River Thames. So there's this massive wet wipe as they've all kind of come down the river and congealed into one big horrible gunky mess, which is supposed to be 180 tons of congealed wet wipes. And it's formed an island along a 250-metre stretch of the tidal Thames near Hammersmith Bridge. Right, okay. So it's the size of 2 tennis courts, changed the course of the river, blah, blah, blah. So it's obviously a big issue. And so they get in like a big 8-ton excavator to carefully remove the island, which is 1 metre high in places. I mean, it's not a small island. It doesn't say how much this is going to cost, but the Thames Water announced a 1.8 billion investment to improve river health across London. And this is just like, I can't believe I'm reading this thing, and you've got to read it, to be fair. It's because this Thames 21 and its volunteers, which are obviously I think the charity group, have been monitoring the islands since 2017. I can't believe, right, we're in 2025, that's nearly 10 years. It's taken them 10 years to move this island of wet wipes. Surely if they'd have moved it or done something in 2017, they wouldn't need this blinking great big 8-ton excavator to go and do it.
Well, there's two other bits to that, Jane. Is one, why are the wet wipes getting into the sewer in the first place? So people must be flushing them. And then the second part of it is, if it's in the sewer, it shouldn't actually be getting into the river. So it's obviously been going in the stormwater overflows and bypassing the sewage treatment plant. So there's two bits to that story that are not great at all. It's quite disgusting. Remember, I think is it Wales that's banned the plastic wet wipes? So the problem with wet wipes is not the biodegradable ones. It's obviously the ones with plastic in them that don't degrade, which is what causes the problems. But I think Wales has just recently banned them, and England and Scotland are meant to be following suit. But I picked up in the back of that one, a Telegraph article about, it was headlined, "Wet Wipe Police Track Down Sewer Blockers." So they seemingly have technology, they seemingly have the equipment that they'll put down a drain, and it's a spiky thing that catches wet wipes. So if they've got issues where their sewers are getting blocked by wet wipes on a regular basis, they put these down, they work out how many wet wipes are getting over a period of time, and then they track it back to the household. And then they're potentially fining households if they don't change behaviour.
I'd like to see them try that. That would be an interesting one. Can you imagine knocking on my door? I don't use wet wipes. No way.
The bottom line is, don't put things down the toilet that shouldn't be there. And that includes wet wipes and cotton buds and all sorts of other stuff people put down the toilet, because at the end of the day, it ultimately goes into our rivers and our seas, and that's the last thing we want. So, because
there was a while back, there was something about fatbergs, wasn't there?
Yeah, and there still is.
And that was the thing. The wet wipes were catching all the fat and everything and making these massive fatbergs in sewers that, again, they had to get rid of.
Yeah. The other one I picked up on was the Environment Agency have confiscated £75,000 from Lincolnshire waste criminals. But what was quite interesting, so £75,000 sounds like quite a lot of money, but with landfill tax, £126 a tonne, they probably made lots of money. But what was really interesting about this case was they've actually gone down the trail and they've fined and put confiscation orders, I can't say that word properly, for the operator of the machine and the drivers that delivered the waste to the site as well. So an interesting approach, and I think if that approach continues, then I think that might be a good way of tackling some of the waste crime we've got.
Yeah, because people must know they're taking waste to an illegal site.
Yep. But I think one of the further on in the article, it's a waste company that did deliver the waste to the site was also prosecuted because they weren't carrying out their due diligence in terms of duty of care.
No, yeah.
So
okay.
they did seem to get it. So as usual with these, we'll share the link if anybody's interested and have a look at the detail.
The one I've got here is food waste. Now, we've talked about food waste quite a lot because we have food waste collections and we should be using them. And there's a BBC article which says families bin £90 of food a month as black bag limits loom. That's hard to say.
That's like that's £1,000 a year. That's like...
Yeah. I mean, this was looking at RAP Wales, RAP Cymru, which says it's combed through thousands and thousands of people's bins. And the average family in Wales throws out £90 worth of food every month. And you've got to remember, Wales have actually got they've got a food waste collection.
Yep.
So, and we know that there's so much food waste. What I got, right, the food waste collection in Wales, there's a food waste collection in Scotland. I was down at my my mum's house the other week. Mum, where do I put my apple core? We've got no food waste collection. No food waste collection in England.
Has she not got a compost bin in the garden, Jane?
She does, and she does use that sometimes, but it is quite, I mean, she's 88, bless her. You can't expect her to be digging out her compost, I mean. So the fact that Wales have found that there's only 80% of people using their bins, or less than 8. Sorry, there was an 80% number here.
Well, no, they're saying 80% of it could be eaten. So it's not
I see.
as if even it's material, it's food that's actually, still intact, I think what they're saying. It's interesting because I think most councils know that when they put out a food waste collection, the first weeks are normally the big tonnage. And then what they find is the tonnage drops down because by segregating the food waste, people actually suddenly realise how much food they're throwing out and how much that's costing them.
Yeah.
So, it's interesting.
Yeah.
I picked up one. There's one closer to home, North Ayrshire Council. So a Labour councillor had at a committee meeting, I presume, has said he found it appalling that a leading administration were handing out second-hand mattresses from the Cowp to homeless people. So it turns out what the council was doing was they were getting second-hand furniture and second-hand mattresses. They were putting it through a recycling reuse charity. They were all getting cleaned up. They were all getting tidied up. And then that furniture was going back into, provide furniture for people in need. So people moving into, for example, council houses and so on. But obviously this Labour member decided to make a bit of a political point about it. But I think sometimes, in terms of the amount of waste we produce in this country, there is perfectly good furniture out there. There are perfectly good mattresses out there that, we should be trying to give them a second life. And if you remember back to when we had Anthony Burns on, Chief Operating Officer at ACS, which was a clothing company, episode 57, and what they did, they managed to demonstrate that they rented clothes, and they demonstrated by the cleaning method they used, it was much, much cleaner to use their clothes than it was to use shop bought clothes. So the similar principle applies to,
mattresses, yeah.
If I was homeless and getting put up in a council flat and was in desperate need of furniture, I don't think I would particularly care if it was second hand or brand new out of package. I'd be just quite glad that it was, I was getting something there. So I think the Labour member was sort of put back in his box and told it was the right thing to do rather than him try to score a political point. But
yeah,
maybe some of our listeners from North Ayrshire Council area can give us more information on that one.
You never know. I think the last news item. Now, I had to look this up actually because it's a news item. Hundreds of pigs have been released in the New Forest for the annual pannage season. Now, I'd never heard of a pannage season, so I had to look it up on Google, and this is obviously, apparently, Alasdair says I should know this, it's famous, but I didn't know it was called a pannage. I didn't know it's called a pannage. So apparently these pigs are released in the New Forest and they forage for fallen acorns, which are poisonous to the free-roaming ponies and cattle. So they go and chomp up the acorns and hoover everything up. But apparently there's an issue potentially that they're going to hoover up all the food waste containers and the wheelie bins as well, as an easy option to get into the food waste and chomp all that apple cores that have been put through.
I think the New Forest must have just introduced a food waste collection. So I think that's probably the concern, that there is a pannage and the food waste collection. So I think they're thinking the pigs might get into the containers is the logic. So I think the advice is to leave your containers behind a fence where the pigs don't get to. But I think I do actually have friends that live down there, and I think pannage season can be a bit carnage, because I think the pigs are actually quite disruptive.
Yeah, because they're not little. I mean, they're not little pigs either. I mean,
they're pretty big pigs, I think.
Yeah, pretty big pigs. And there's also, like, I'm sure we talked the other day or the other week about the donkeys, because the donkeys have been knocking over the wheelie bins as well. It's, the struggle you go to with donkeys and pigs and wild ponies. Must be hard life in the New Forest.
I'm also slightly suspicious it's the news try to look for a story about food waste to try and say we shouldn't be doing food waste.
Yeah.
So maybe it's not quite a story at all. Maybe it's just a made up one.
I'm looking. You need to go in and have a look at the newsletter or whatever. Go in and have a look at the pigs, because they're gorgeous. They were little black, the orange colours, like reddy colour with little black spots on, and I bet they're called Gloucestershire Old Spots, because the spots are supposed to be from when the apples fall from the orchard onto their backs. Did you know that?
Mm-hmm. No, never knew that. Never knew that.
Well, that's been on holiday in the New Forest once.
Getting my education. So I think that's all the news for today. So as promised, Jane and I are going to talk about household waste collection methods and how they have changed over the years. So before we dive into waste collection methods, I thought it'd be useful to do a bit of history lesson about waste. So early 19th century, waste disposal was largely unregulated. During that period, we had rapid industrialisation and urban growth. That created unprecedented amounts of refuse. Much of it was simply dumped in the street, dumped in rivers, dumped in open land. This led to pretty unsanitary environment and contributed to outbreaks of cholera and other diseases. And that sort of prompted government intervention, particularly in the main cities of the UK. So the turning point was probably Public Health Act 1848, and that mandated local authorities to take responsibility for waste removal and street cleansing. And that mandate is pretty much continued to this day. And that's why, we still get a household waste collection service at our houses. So at that stage, what they call dust yards were the common feature, bearing in mind that much of the heating in the UK at that time was probably coal or wood. So anything remotely burnable would be burnt in the fire. So a lot of the waste that was produced at a household level was tended to be ash, cinders, and a bit of organic waste. That was collected, taken to these dust yards, and they would reuse it for brick making, agriculture, or sometimes as a fuel. So that was where it all started. That's where the requirement for waste removal and street cleansing came from.
So that's 1948, and then we had our dustmen. So that's where the term dustmen came from.
And women as well, Jane. I was looking back through some CIWM history papers, and quite often the sorting of the waste was done by women. The collection might have been men because it was sort of fairly physical role, but some of the sorting in the dust yards was done by women, and there was quite a lot of concern about the health and welfare because it was quite a dusty, not a very smelly job. And I suppose 200 years later, it's not really, or almost 200 years, it's not changed that much, yeah. Which is a bit sad to think about.
Yeah, so carrying on with our history lesson, by the late 19th century, we had incineration or destructor plants. So basically, their growing volumes of waste were burnt, but there was often air pollution, significant air pollution, and this caused a lot of them to close down. And they used to have, well, the councils used to have an incinerator at one point, and a lot of the hospitals had incinerators. But then, presuming the Clean Air Act came along and it shut them all down. But landfilling as well was widespread. Industrial and household waste increased in the 20th century. And so there was more and more landfills to be able to put our waste in. First and Second World Wars, austerity and resource scarcity encouraged reuse and recycling. So if you remember, you might remember your granny or whatever talking about, we never threw anything away, we always reused it and recycled it. Well, they didn't have any money, so why wouldn't you? And then 50s, 60s, 70s, when we turned to wanting things, buying things, not needing things, wanting things. Convenience, packaging and disposal goods became dominant. There we had the landfill site as we know it today, with loads of all sorts of stuff in it, totally unnecessary things that get thrown away.
I still remember getting sent down to the local shop, the local greengrocer shop, with a string bag and handing the list over, and the assistant would put in the 10 oranges and 10 apples or whatever, and then charge me the money, and then I'd walk home with that string bag that was used extensively. So
things have changed now, haven't they? Because now we're back to, well, energy from waste, not incineration, because it's a lot cleaner, and we're back to taking our bags down to the shops. I must admit, those string bags are embarrassing. I remember Mum telling me, go and get it, here's a string bag. And I was like, oh no, somebody might see me carrying this awful looking string bag.
We need to get a picture of a string bag, because there's probably people out there that don't know what a string bag is, Jane.
Oh, it was awful. But anyway, so now we've got, slightly more aesthetically pleasing bags.
But I think during that period, landfill was probably not landfill as we know it now. It's not engineered landfill. It was fill a hole, fill a quarry, fill a,
put a match to it, be fine.
Yeah.
So back to collection methods.
So that's a little bit of history. So gone back in time. So initially the waste collection, because it was predominantly ash, initially it was generally metal bins. So it was these I don't know what they're made of, these alloy bins with a metal lid.
They were quite shiny.
Yeah, they were always quite shiny. So the binmen used to actually come round. Generally, they would be kept at the rear of a property. So the binmen would come round to the back of the property. They would heft it up and throw it on the back of their shoulder. They would walk up to the bin lorry, and then they would tip the contents out over their shoulder into the bin lorry. So a pretty manual and physical job. They would then generally return the bin back to the back of the house. So if you think back now, we stick the bin in the curb and it gets emptied, whereas in the past it got emptied plus taken from where it should be back and forward.
So later on, I don't know, you remember 1970s, 1980s, you didn't have a bin anymore. You had these big plastic bags, and you just put the plastic bags out on the street. And the bin man came along and lifted the bin bags, and hopefully everybody had actually tied them up. Otherwise, all the rubbish went all over the floor, all over the street, and obviously it was your problem, so they didn't clear it up after them. But also, I mean, you put all sorts of things in these black bags, so there was more health and safety issues. And okay, they weren't humping the great big metal bins, they were carrying the plastic bags, which have got slightly less in them. But again, there was potential for these bags to rip if there was something sharp in them and hurt people. So so that wasn't ideal either.
So I suppose the saving there was the council, the bin man, bin lady, wasn't having to go to the back of the
Bin
house and
person.
bin person and pick up the bin and bring it back.
Yeah.
So it was a more efficient collection, but then you always had the cost of, if you had 60,000 houses in the area, you had lots of bags to deliver to these. Because I think from memory at that time, the bags were provided by the council.
They provided by the bags,
and they were good bags.
Yes, not these like thin things you buy these days because they're cheap.
Yep. So then 1980s, 1990, that was probably the move towards the sort of plastic wheelie bins. And one of the drivers for that was probably manual handling operations regulations 1992, which sort of moved that away from humping bags into the back of a bin lorry. It seems relatively straightforward. You're humping one bag into the back of a bin lorry, that's manageable. But when you're doing that, 1,000 times a day,
hundreds of times,
or hundreds of times a day, then it can be problematic. So the advent of the wheelie bins was combined also with automatic lifting gear in the back of the vehicle, which generally made it safer for the operator. They wheeled the bin on, the bin lift grabbed it, it tipped it, and it brought the bin back down. But interesting, I think we've maybe mentioned on this before on our talk about one of the risks at the moment, and it's quite a concern for the waste industry and the health and safety executive, is these bin lifts, when they're on automatic cycle, don't really care if it's a bin or whether it's a person. So if you get yourself in the wrong place beside one of these bin lifts when it's on automatic, you're in grave danger of getting yourself lifted up and into the back of a bin lorry. And there have actually been operators killed or badly injured because of that. So it is one of these things that, although it's an efficient collection method, there is a risk associated with it that the industry is trying to engineer out at the moment with various control measures.
Yeah, and I suppose the other issue is, and we keep going on about this as well, is not putting the right things in the bin. So when everything goes into the bin lorry, it doesn't spit back or whatever. I saw, there's a video of a gas canister that had been put in, and it just absolutely exploded and flew out of the back of the bin lorry. Or, again, the batteries with the fire. So, it's just a hazardous job, being a bin person. So in terms of what happens to your rubbish when you put it out on there, or where do you put it? Some people put it at the side. We've got curbside sort. So these are the different methods of, I suppose, putting your bins out and what you're going to get. So we've got curbside sort. So you've got your recycle it. So you can either place it in boxes and collection staff check it and sort it prior to placing it in compartments. So this is much higher quality recycle it, more time consuming and expensive. We used to have boxes before we got the wheelie bins. We had boxes which you put in your plastics and everything like that, and then the actual bin man could have a look and see, oh my goodness, she's had a lot of wine this week. So now it's in a wheelie bin and you can't see quite so much. But it does mean more higher quality recycle it. And they do, I mean, when we were talking to Andy Rees, what episode was it? Episode 75, the main man in waste strategy at the Welsh Government, he was talking about that and how in Wales that's what they do. So they've got much higher quality recycling.
I suppose the change we never chatted through there is, back in the 80s and 90s, we moved to wheelie bins, and that was still up till late 1990s. That was generally for residual waste. It was only after that period that we started splitting out bins. So you'd have a bin for your cardboard, you'd have a bin for your plastics and your metals and so on. So much of the UK uses wheelie bins, a combination of a number of different wheelie bins for different things. But obviously, as Jane said, there's the curbside sort option, which is where you collect in boxes and then it's sorted. So rather than it all being tipped into the back of the lorry and you're not being able to do much about it, the operator actually sorts it at the side of the vehicle. So it takes a bit longer, but then you get much higher quality material.
Because that's what they used to do in East Ayrshire Council, didn't they?
That's right. But
they've changed back to...
They moved. And I think the challenge, it's interesting that Wales, I'm still a bit fascinated that Wales has pushed curbside sort so far and used it quite actively, whereas it doesn't seem to have taken off really any place else. East Ayrshire Council had a bit, or they did all of theirs like that, and Dumfries and Galloway had a section down at Stranraer, but that's the only councils I know in Scotland. East Lothian do a bit with boxes as well. So it is relatively, there are different methods used across the country. The other option that's used very extensively in Europe is actually communal systems. So, although there's a legal requirement, you must provide household waste collection, it doesn't say it needs to be at your doorstep. So you could have a communal system at the end of the street. In fact, the office where I'm standing, I could look out the window and look at the South Ayrshire Council communal system. When it's used in Europe, quite often you need an ID card to access it. So there's a bit of control there. If people put the wrong stuff in the wrong bin, and if they've actually got, they can trace it back to people. The advantages of that is obviously it reduces collection costs. It brings everything to a central point. But the disadvantages, if the public don't use it properly, often the material is contaminated and it's poorly looked after. So they're most common in sort of communal areas. I remember back to Edinburgh Council had a big outcry because they put some communal bins, but they were taking up car parking spaces. So there's a huge outcry because the parking space has been lost rather than about the bins. But it was their way of trying to manage their service a bit more efficiently.
Well, it's all flatted properties in Edinburgh. I mean, I know where my daughter is in a flat in, a street where there's loads of flats and everything. Everything's in communal bins outside. It's quite common.
It works as long as they're regularly serviced and as long as the public try and use them to the best of their ability.
Yeah. So often we have the bin man, and he's got the driver of the bin lorry, and then the bin men / women are there to load the wheelie bins on them. But there's also potentially or possibly driver only collections, and really you need 2 people really to make it safe. But some of these driver only collections, I think they've got a robotic arm which lifts the bin into the hopper, which I've never actually seen.
Have you not? Stirling Council used it quite extensively.
Oh, really?
Yeah, so the driver had to pull along beside the bin, and it worked as long as the bin was roughly in the right place, and it'd put the arm out and lift the bin and tip it.
Oh, really? That's quite cool, actually.
So to a certain extent, for rural areas where there's big distances between travel, then it probably makes a bit of sense. But the other one that does it quite extensively is on the commercial side. Biffa Waste generally do single operator drivers vehicles,
right, okay.
and they use what they call an FEL, a front end loader, where for the bigger bins they actually drive. They drive into them and they pick up the forks and it tips over the front of the cab. And again, it's just all about the cost, because the cost of having 2 staff versus one staff.
And I suppose it's not too bad if you've only got, if there's 2 staff and it's a 240 litre wheelie bin. But when you've got these big commercial bins, actually trying to manage and manoeuvre them is quite difficult manually. Whereas if you've got these tippy up and over ones.
Yeah. So in terms of, I think one of the things people don't quite understand is the sheer operational costs. So most councils will be sending a bin lorry for something, whether it's residual waste or recycle it, to every house in the UK, once per week. And you're talking, so you've got the cost of the vehicle, so they can be anything up to, a couple of £100,000 to buy. They would probably be writing them off over maybe 5 years, maybe some cases 7 years. You've got a crew, so you've got a driver plus 1, 2 or 3 operators usually. You've then got the distance to the depot. So how far is it going from the depot to the houses they're collecting? And then they've also got the added complication of the distance to the tipping location. And generally, most councils would be, for example, do two collections in a day. So they would go out, do a collection, fill the vehicle, go to the tipping location, and then back out in the street again and back to the tipping location, so they're empty and ready to go the next day. But obviously that routing all depends on, the size of the vehicle. Obviously the bigger the vehicle, the better, the more stuff you can get in it. But if you're down narrow roads, down narrow streets, then that's maybe not ideal. So there's all sorts of complications that the operational staff at councils need to take into account of effectively carrying out an efficient recycling service or collection service.
Yeah, and I think there's lots of factors, isn't there? We thought we'd have a look at the cost. How does that compare to your council tax? How much is the cost of a bin lorry or your bin collection compared to how much you normally pay in council tax? So we had a look and we found out that the total net cost for household waste management per household in the UK, the average, was £154.07. Now bear in mind that seemed to be in 2018, so it's probably a bit more by now. And that includes collection, disposal, recycling costs, and then there's more specific charges for your bulky items or your garden waste, depending on what that is, between £5 and £85, depending on where you are, what you've got, etc. So, I mean, £154.07 over a year is not, is not particularly, not particularly bad, is it really? If you divide that by 52 weeks in a year, and if you're looking at your average council tax is around about £2,000. So if you've got £2,000 council tax bill,
you're probably going to you're probably going to upset people that are paying more than £2,000 or people that are paying less than £2,000.
Okay, sorry. Well, perhaps the average is £2,000. I'm saying a month. It's not a month. I'm talking nonsense there.
Yeah.
So also we looked at, what's the percentage normally of how much your waste management and street cleansing, because there's also street cleansing that comes out after that, emptying the bins in the street and getting the street cleaner to go down and scrape off all the chewing gum that people seem to drop on the streets and cause a bit of a problem. So £1, Alasdair, how much do you think out of that £1 is spent on waste management and street cleaning?
I think it's a whole 7 pence, but I can see the answer, Jane.
You're supposed to guess. So yeah, 7p. So out of £1, 7 pence, 7% of your pound is spent on street and waste management, street cleaning, which is not a lot.
It's just amazing that 57 pence is spent in social care, which takes, nursing homes and thingy. It just shows you why. I know talking to waste management people, their waste budget is under pressure all the time.
Yeah,
and it's they're actually doing quite a lot for not very much money.
Not very much money, yeah.
And I think that's sometimes we forget that. So yeah. So I suppose the question that's not on here, Jane, is what's the future? What's the new invention for waste collection in the next 50 years? What's going to happen? Driverless vehicles picking up the bins without operators.
You'll have drones coming along and checking that the right waste is in there first.
Opening the lid first.
Yeah, having a look, making sure the right waste is, and then the driverless vehicles will come along and empty it.
Yeah, the one we probably should have chatted about was the fact that there are councils out there with microchips in the bins, and in theory they can weigh every bin. So every bin, and they can track it back to potentially they can start what they call variable charging. So you produce a lot of residual waste, you get charged more money. You produce a lot of recycle it and not very much residual waste, then you get charged less money.
Yeah, which makes sense.
And that's so that technology is actually out there at the moment. Whether that will happen or not is a different question. So
yeah,
there we go. And the only thing, I'm not going to turn it into rant, but the only thing we've done wrong, I think, with wheelie bins is years and years ago, we should have agreed consistent colours, that a glass recycling's purple, for example, a paper and cardboard is grey, or whatever it is.
No, paper and card is blue.
You know, we've got these different coloured wheelie bins all around the country, and we've got no consistency. So people quite rightly say they're confused. And the other one that I'm aware of is it's actually much, much cheaper to buy a grey or a black bin. They're much cheaper to produce.
All right, okay.
Because the colour actually adds quite a bit of cost to it. So what we should really be doing is buying grey or black bins and then just changing the colour by changing the colour of the lid.
Okay.
And then that would save all the councils quite a lot of money.
Okay. I tell you, my grey bins lasted forever. The other ones are a bit kind of flimsy, but I think, the grey bin's going to be there for a while.
I had my original residual bin was ancient. It was probably about 30 years old until I think it must have fallen into the back of bin lorry one day, and I had to get
another one.
I had to get a replacement. So just for people that aren't aware, that does sometimes happen as the bin gets more worn. When it gets picked up by the bin lift equipment, sometimes when they go to tip it, it does actually genuinely fall in the back of the lorry, and generally the operators can't get it back out. So if you ever go out and your bin's vanished, it's probably not because your neighbour's stolen it. It's probably because it's disappeared into the back of the bin lorry.
Well, I think my mum's had problems because she reckons her neighbour's been taking her bag that she puts the paper in. So hopefully they're not listening to this.
What do you mean she's taking the paper?
Well, no, she's got a bag that they put their paper in.
Right,
and
okay.
And she'd put a little tie on it so they could remember which one's hers. So she went out and it gone. And the neighbour 2 doors down had been using it. So she pinched it back again. And then she put it out. And then the neighbour pinched it back again. But hopefully Mum's not listening.
I have been known, I probably shouldn't confess this, I have been known when my bin, for example, for cardboard has been full, I've been known to go to other people's bins that have got a bit of space and put my cardboard in their bin. Only on collection day or the night before collection day.
I was going to say, I hope you asked them.
No, I just did it. It was back lane. They wouldn't notice. And just a wee word for the public. The refuse collection crews would appreciate, and you see it quite often when bins are presented. You should always present the bin with the handles to the street, because that's the way the crew are going to collect it.
It's a lot easier for them.
Yeah, so quite often if you put it at a wall in your house or whatever, you'll reverse it so you can open the lid properly, which is what you do. But it's the reverse when you put it in the street for the collection crews. So they'll thank you. They'll like you, because the crews are actually taught that when they empty the bin, they return it the other way, and that way they can look down the street and make sure everything's been emptied.
All right, I didn't know that.
Yeah, they I don't know if you noticed, they always turn it. The properly trained crew will turn it the other way, and they'll, quite often if there's 2 or 3 of them, so if they follow down, they know that one's done because it's turned the other way.
Wow. I'll be checking that on Friday when the bins. Normally they just kind of like leave it in the middle of the street, so it's like middle of the pavement. But anyway,
there we go.
So, have you got any rants for us this week, Alasdair?
No, I've actually got. Go for a positive one. So last week I was down at the big resource management show down at Birmingham. It's been
jolly.
A good couple of years since I've been down. It was held at the NEC. What the organisers done is they put waste management and they put contaminated land, they put environmental testing all together as a show. So it's massive. It's just like 2 days. You couldn't get around every stand at all. Lots of speakers, lots of talks. Not big theatres, maybe sort of 30, 40 people each talk. But when I was there, it was really busy, really active, really buoyant. So it was good to see for the waste sector. It was really positive. So I'm not going to have a rant this week. I'm just going to have a positive. I'm going for positive this week, Jane.
Good. I'm glad we've gone for a positive. I did like that. So is that us sorted?
That's us. Episode 77.
Excellent.
Thanks for tuning in. We hope you enjoyed this episode. See you again next Thursday at 4 p.m. Don't forget to follow, share with friends, and send us your feedback at hello@rubbishtalk.co.uk.